Hello, hello, I am Capitao. Today we're bringing you another operator guide in Rainbow Six Extraction. Today we're talking about Smoke. He is one of my personal favorite operators for a number of different reasons. We'll talk about his ability, we'll talk about his loadout, we'll show you some in-game footage here in just a minute. And if you want to see me play Smoke live when he's available in the Maelstrom and in some of the end-game content, I do weekly viewer streams Monday through Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Twitch at Mercaba18. There's a link in the description below. Go check out the live stream, follow the channel. Also, please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel here. We're trying to get it monetized, and you guys have been unbelievable with your support. So thank you so much for that. Like and comment here below as well. Tell me who I should do an in-depth guide on next. So Smoke is described in the game as a toxic gas area denial operator, and the toxic gas, it does damage. We'll talk about the specifics and show you some in-game footage of it here in a minute. But the area denial part of it is really important. And again, we'll talk more about that in a second. So he is, as you also saw there, some of the highest speed and armor levels in the entire game. So he moves faster than the average operator and takes a little bit less damage than some of the top level ones. So he's not going to move faster than, say, like Vigil necessarily, but he's also going to take a lot less damage than, let's say, IQ. So just keep in mind he moves pretty quick, and he's got quite a bit of armor there. So remember that as we talk about his ability. So his remote gas grenades are remote detonated, which means you throw them out into an environment. You much like a C4, for example. So you throw them out in the environment one at a time. You detonate them, and they will deal damage to any Archaen that runs through them. So keep that in mind. The primary use is as a damage denier. You'll see what that looks like in the game here in a minute, but it will sort of stop any Archaeans from rushing through and running towards your team. At level 2, you have an additional grenade, so it goes from 3 to 4. And an arsenal update here at level 3. I don't personally use this gun very much, but we'll talk about his guns here in a second more. His speed increase at level 4 is super important. He becomes one of the faster operators in the game. And at level 5 is one of the best perks in the game. He becomes able to... when he's down, he becomes able to replenish health for every Archaen killed. So if you're surrounded by Archaeans and you're suddenly in a bit of a pickle, if you down enough of them, you'll instantly revive yourself, which is a really cool little perk. One of the better ones in the game, in my opinion. At level 6, you get a shotgun and an SMG pistol. I don't use either of these, but that is, again, a little bit of a personal choice. Toxicity at level 7. This is a really, really important upgrade. At level 7, you get the increase to 85 damage. It doesn't tell you what the base damage is, but that's a little bit less damage than Capitao, for example, who is one of the more direct overlaps in terms of like for like. So Capitao and him are going to be very similar. And we'll talk about differences in the in-game footage here in a minute. The other effect here is that enemies that run through the gas are going to become scanned so that your team will have intelligence about them. That's a little bit of a knock on intelligence gathering. It's not something you want to necessarily rely on as you would with Lion, for example, or with an XR drone, but it becomes a little bit of an important knock-on effect that you can tell where enemies are. So even if your back is turned to Smoke, your team may be able to see who's coming towards them. At level 8, you have a little bit of an armor upgrade, and that also makes him one of the toughest operators in the entire game. So he's really well balanced. He brings a ton to the table in terms of armor and speed and utility. His arsenal update at level 9 is really good. I use this all the time as a run and gun option, a much faster, more mobile option. And then at 10, you get the big upgrade, which is that the duration goes from the base level to 10 seconds, and you get an additional grenade. So you start with 3, and you'll end up with 5. Now, crucially, his ability does not recharge, meaning that anytime you expend all of them, you're going to want to use refresh boxes to get more of them. So keep that in mind as you're building your team. If you have a Doc, Smoke, and Rook, for example, all of them are going to need boxes in order to refresh their ability, and that's an important factor as you decide what to do with them. So let's talk about his arsenal. I tend to use his base gun the most, the L85A2. As you can see here with a compensator, the recoil pattern is really good. Pretty good damage, not the highest, not the lowest. Fire rate is pretty slow, but it does pack quite a punch for a low recoil, pretty easy to control gun. It is a great option. The reload speed is pretty standard. At the one of the arsenal upgrades you get, I don't think I've really ever used this gun much. It does have a pretty decent fire rate, and if you take the suppressor off, it does have some decent damage for an SMG. It does have a little bit of a standard, SMG spread. I just don't see it as his best option, especially as compared to. It does a little bit more damage than the MP5, but I tend to like the MP5 more because of the fire rate and because of the capacity. I just tend to use the MP5 a little bit more personally. I almost never use this shotgun, primarily because of the capacity, and I also just don't really care for shotguns. And I'll go further in depth on that in the gun video that I'm going to do for this game, but part of the reason for that is I tend to play a little bit more aggressively in a run and gun style. So I'm often at the front of the line dealing with Archaen rushes and a ton of different enemies surrounding me at once. And the shotguns fire too slowly and they require too much time to reload in order to make that style effective. Now, you can pull it off if you're into that. I just personally don't tend to use them very much. So let's talk about his secondary. A lot of people love his SMG-11. You can use it as a good silenced option. It has one of the fastest fire rates in the game, but as you can also see by the recoil pattern, it is one of the hardest to control, especially on controller. And if you look at the magazine, you'll dump the mag in less than a half a second. So it's a really good option if you can control it, and it's a decent silenced option. If you take the SMG silencer off and put an extended barrel off, it increases the drop off range, and the compensator tends to look at the difference is minimal even with a compensator for rapid firing. So look at that versus that. It's very, very hard to tell the difference. It is there, but it's hard to tell the difference, especially at the top end. So I personally don't tend to use this gun very often as a result of having a difficult time controlling the recoil. But if you can, it's a great secondary option, especially in a pinch and where you need to pump a ton of bullets out in a short amount of time. I tend to use his P226 as my silenced secondary. It does quite a bit of damage even while silenced. It's got a pretty decent mag, and the recoil is much easier to control. So I tend to just go with this one as my first choice. So let's talk about, I've mentioned in this video and in these videos before that a lot of these operators, their ult acts as a like-for-like replacement, and it often will improve upon or do something slightly different than the explosives in this game. Now again, we're going to go through an in-depth guide on each of these grenades and explosives, but what you want to kind of keep in mind is that smoke is a like-for-like replacement, and one of the things that makes them unique is it's a like-for-like replacement, but it actually makes an even better impact than the smoke grenades here. So essentially, smoke grenades are very much useful for blocking lines of sight, denying so let's say there's a U and a door and there's a walkway in between or a hallway where a bunch of Archaeans are. You pop some smoke down. They can't really see you run across. They may go and investigate the noise or see what's going on over there, but you can run across and go through the door with your team, and you've sort of snuck through without having them howl. So Smoke can do the same sort of thing with his ability, and we'll talk about that more in the in-depth footage here in a minute. But it also improves on that so that if they run through it, it will also scan them, and it'll stop them from running forward because it does do damage to them, a substantial amount of damage. So it's great for area denial and such. And in much the way that, let's say, for example, Lion removes the need for scan grenades or any kind of intel gathering, Lion does not, his ability doesn't do as well as a scan mine because this does not require movement. So Smoke is unique in that he not only replaces an active explosive in the game, he makes it better, frankly. So just keep that in mind as we go into the in-depth footage here in just a minute. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like in the game, and I'll talk about some pro tips and some basic tips for you. Let's go ahead and take a look. All right, here we are in game on Smoke. This is a max level operator guide, just so that you know. As you can see, we have 5 smokes there at the bottom right. I have brought a explosive belt and some paralysis grenades, and I kind of want to expand upon the utility that Smoke brings to the table just for a minute here. So Smoke, his ult can deny areas of line of sight. It can do damage to Archaeans and scan them. So we can use them in all those different ways. And one of the things that you can do with smoke is extend that in much the way that Finka, for example, you can use a rush pistol to get a mini copy of her ability. You can also bring additional smoke grenades to expand on the utility that he already brings to the table. But all of those tech options and all of the different choices that you make in terms of belt and grenades are going to make a difference exclusively based on your gameplay style, the way in which you want to try to complete something, or what your team needs. So in this case, we're just going to use paralysis grenades, but just keep in mind that smoke grenades are a great addition, and that is much in contrast to, like, for example, bringing an XR drone with Lion, because I feel as if that is a little bit of a waste of his ability rather than a extension of it, if you will. So as you can see here, I am using his P22K, or P22M6, excuse me. Can't speak today for some reason. Let's go ahead and take these guys down, and then I'll show you some basic tips on how to utilize smoke. Get out of here. All right, so let's say, for example, like we have alerted here, and we need to, well, first of all, this is the P226 MK, one of my favorite guns of his. We'll take this gentleman down since he's being rowdy. I also tend to use his L85 as a primary loud option. I use the longer scope. Just all depends on your personal preference. So those are the ones I currently have. Let's talk about some basics here. So in order to deploy his ult, you just hit the ult button and you throw it out. In that area, you'll start to, if you detonate it, you start to see a very distinct green gas that is different than any other type of smoke in the game. So, for example, if you're using Capitao, who has a very direct overlap with smoke here, his smoke even looks a little bit different so that you can tell the difference. So that's what his smoke looks like. It's also not gray the way a smoke grenade is. So you can tell that that smokes Z9 grenades and nobody else's in the game. So let's say, for example, one of the easiest basic tips that I can give you is, let's say we need to, our team is sitting here, there's a bunch of Archaeans right here, and we don't want to howl. We can either pop a smoke grenade right here, run across into that, or we can pop one of his Z9 grenades. They can't really see us anymore. We can go through here quietly, instantly through the objective onto the next part without having to shoot at those Archaeans or do anything that would alert them. Pretty basic way to utilize him. That's not an area denial necessarily. That's more of a strategic, basic. So let's talk about how I tend to use these Z9 grenades in an objective sense, on an objective, in an incursion. So let's say we have a rescue target like we do on this particular map. This is one of my favorite ways to use him. You go in, you chuck one right at the target. That guy's going to start to take damage. That guy's going to try to run through to me. Can't. So now I've gotten to the assay. These guys are taking damage and dying. I can quickly get out of there. And as you can see, if they run through it, they will also become scanned temporarily, meaning that my team can see where they are. I've gotten the asset out without even taking a single hit. Not only that, but they didn't howl. They didn't see me. None of that. So it's a very easy way to cover your objective if you need to get in and out. And the applications to that become sort of endless, if you will. And I'll demonstrate how that works in a second. So let's take this other example where we were trying to cross over here. There's a nest, or there's a group of Archaeans that are either cloaked or just hanging out right there. You chuck a Z9 right there, deny their line of sight. Come on over here. Do a little nest tracking right here. Boom. You've got a couple more, you hit them, and then you finish the objective. It creates a way in which you can utilize his ability, and by extension some grenades, to create a line of sight for your team, or a line of sight denial for your team. Another way, like let's take an example of decontamination. Let's say there's a ton of nests in here. So we got one there, like 3 here, 2 right here, right? Pop a couple of grenades. Anything that spawns out of those nests is going to instantly take them damage. They're not going to see you. You can take the nest down, move throughout the rest of the area, take down all the nests before you even have to deal with a specific enemy charging you or anything. The endless applications continue, like let's say, for example, you're doing serial scan or sabotage. You can sit on the scan, or you can defend the tower and deny any kind of area right through here. Deny an area right through here, and no longer can is your tower in danger of being rushed, at least as long as those are up. So it becomes an area of denial for a brief duration. Let's say there's an apex here, and you're on level 9 of the subzone, you're doing a sabotage defense, you chuck 2 grenades there, you chuck 2 grenades there, and then you're going to cover the entire area for a good 10 to 15 seconds, depending on how long between deploys. Now, one important tip to remember is that you can only deploy one smoke at a time, meaning if I chuck one there, I have to detonate that one before I can run over here and try to do another one. So if I go throw one there and try to chuck another one over here, it's only going to explode that one before I can deploy it over here. Just the same way that you can't put 2 fuse bombs on 2 doors at once. You can detonate them, put one out, and then detonate it again, but you have to detonate one before you can do the other. So keep that in mind as we move forward. So another way in which you can use Smoke's ability is on other objectives like Shutdown, in which you have a short area to cover, and you have a number of different enemies between you and the helipad. So let's say there's only one clear path. If you go that direction, you're going to run into a ton of enemies. If you go that direction, you're going to run into a ton of nests. You can pop a smoke right here, come through here, and you're clean all the way to the end, and it creates a clear path for you. So just remember that the endless applications are there for smoke, and you will do yourself a lot of favors by extending that application with smoke grenades and belt and the like, depending on your skill level and what you need. One other thing I would like to mention here as we conclude this video is that Smoke has a pretty direct overlap with Capitao. Capitao's crossbow bolts his venom bolts on his crossbow will do additional damage as compared to Smoke's. You get fewer of those, for example, though, and Capitao is going to have smoke grenades in much the same way that, like, let's say I'm using my Z9 grenades and smoke grenades, you're going to end up with something of a very direct overlap. So where Capitao may have less of them and they do a little bit more damage, Smoke's going to have more of them, and it's going to be a little bit harder for enemies to rush through it. There's just a little bit of a direct overlap there, so keep that in mind. It would probably be a little bit of a waste to bring both a Capitao and a Smoke into the same incursion, unless you're just really into that style of play, and it's not going to affect your team. So just keep that in mind as you build your team and choose your operators. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you think of this video below, and remember to subscribe to the channel. I am doing live streams on Twitch at Merkaba18 every Monday through Thursday. Please remember to come on over to the Twitch channel if you're watching this video. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.